A powerful man said he wanted to keep me, out of kindness. I reminded him, "Sir, I'm an alpha." He didn't respond, but his assistant told me that what he wanted was exactly a tough, durable alpha who couldn't have children. I understood immediately and signed a 20 million contract on the spot. It was for 1 year, half a month before it expired. His assistant came to me again, renew for another 2 years. I politely turned him down. I'd better not, because, unfortunately, I was pregnant. 1. In the wealthy eastern suburbs, there's a top-tier private club, membership only, with a net worth of 50 million required to join. Here, alphas wearing bite stoppers and omegas wearing collars are treated as goods you can pick at will. And me, on my very first night, before I even had time to put on the bite stopper, I was chosen by a powerful man. The manager personally led me into a private room. He was sitting right in the middle of the sofa, upper body hidden in the dark, a tiny glow of red flickering between his fingers. He had no intention of speaking. I gave a small cough to break the silence. "Sir, I'm also an alpha. I might not be what you're looking for." No sooner had I said that than his assistant came over and handed me a file. "This is the contract. Please take a look." I cooperated and opened it, while the assistant leaned close and whispered in my ear, "He specifically wants a strong, unbreakable alpha who can't have kids. You fit perfectly." Just then, I saw the number, 20 million written in black and white. I nodded. "Got it." Taking the pen, I quickly signed the name Carlos. The assistant took the file, gave me a card and his own business card, then left briskly. Only the two of us were left in the room. "Come here." The man finally spoke. I exhaled lightly and forced a smile. I walked over, standing between his legs, and went down on one knee. Just as my fingers touched his belt buckle, he brushed my hand away. His palm lifted my chin, the cigarette between his fingers hovering barely a centimeter from my face. "Have you learned before?" I licked my dry lips. "Yes, I have. Don't fake it. My assistant should have already told you why I chose you. One more thing." His cold gaze swept inch by inch from my brow downward. "You provide the service. I pay. Our relationship goes no further than that. I hope you keep that in mind." Got it." I nodded furiously like a pecking bird, carefully pushing away his hand with 2 fingers. I curved my lips into a smile. "Then may I ask, what's your preference? Reserved, wild, loud, silent?" My cheeks were suddenly squeezed, a faint sting spreading under his fingers. "I like quiet ones." "Oh," I muttered inwardly, annoyed. "Exactly the same as when we were kids, too." I got into Mason's car. Even though the back seat had separate chairs with plenty of space in between, I still couldn't help edging away, because my pheromone scent is ylang ylang, a fragrance that should have belonged only to top-tier omegas, but instead appeared on me, an ordinary alpha, and sometimes even went out of control. So in a confined space, I always worried about bothering other people. I grew up in an orphanage. At 13, when I differentiated into an alpha, my pheromone was a strong, almost seductive floral scent. My roommates mocked me as some freak, neither male nor female, neither alpha nor omega. They ostracized me. My bed was often soaked, and my towel and toothbrush always ended up in the toilets. That winter, I came down with a high fever, and my pheromones spiraled out of control. The teacher, afraid I'd affect others, shoved me into a single room at the far end of the 3rd floor. But really, it was just a storage room they'd cleared out temporarily. I stayed shut in there all day. That night, I heard knocking at the door. I thought it was a doctor bringing me medicine. I opened the door, only to be greeted by a basin of ice-cold water splashed all over me. I froze, too shocked to even get angry. I just wanted to cry, but I didn't dare cry out loud. There were still plenty of teachers' rooms on that floor. Holding it in until my chest hurt, I squatted down, gritting my teeth. I must have made some noise after all. From the room across the hall, I heard a door open. Thinking it was a teacher, I wobbled to my feet, head hanging, about to apologize, when a warm hand lifted my chin. It wasn't a teacher, but a boy half a head taller than me. He was wearing expensive-looking pajamas, his face cold, but I could clearly see the redness around his eyes. He must have been crying too. My head was fuzzy. While sobbing, I asked him if he'd been splashed as well. He stayed quiet for a couple of seconds, then muttered "idiot" under his breath, kicked the basin away, and dragged me by the wrist into his room. His room had a hot shower. He gave me expensive pajamas to wear. He gave me fast-acting fever medicine. He gave me special pheromone suppressant patches. He told me if I cried again, he'd beat me up, and he told me his name was Mason. 3. Mason. I rolled the name around on my tongue. Leaning against the car window, I stole a glance at him. Ever since we were kids, he carried this natural air of distance and elegance. I never knew why he ended up in the orphanage, but after that night, his luxurious single room became a double. Mason gave me the unused top bunk. He had private tutors, and he never ate with the rest of us. His textbooks were all in English. He was great at fighting anyone who bullied me. He beat them up one by one, but he didn't know how to wash clothes or clean shoes. I did, so I washed them for him, for 5 whole years. I also brought him white roses still damp with morning dew, picked worm-bitten green apples, and told him endless silly jokes. Whenever he couldn't stand me anymore, he'd pin me down on the lower bunk, cover my mouth, and force me to shut up. I'd squint my eyes at him, breathing warm air against his palm. 1 second, 2, 3, the tips of his ears would turn red, and then he'd throw the blanket over my head. So I hugged his blanket and laughed. I can't even remember when it started, but the top bunk went unused again. There were always times when even the strongest suppressants couldn't hold back my pheromones. Threads of ylang-ylang fragrance would escape. 18-year-old Mason lost his sleep, his voice hoarse. He offered to get me a new patch. He peeled the old one off, but didn't move for a long time. So I moved. Rolling over, I accidentally brushed against his slightly parted lips. Somehow, I touched them again. By the 3rd time, the butterfly came to me of its own will. It landed and didn't leave. Ylang-ylang scent is sweet. The butterfly fluttered its wings, searching curiously. At last, it found the spot it liked and stayed there. I asked in a daze, "How do butterflies collect nectar?" Mason didn't answer. He just covered my mouth. But I still found out. A nervous young butterfly will first carefully open the petals with its tiny feet, then extend its curled proboscis, probing slowly, following instinct to drink the nectar. Half dreaming, I thought, it's late autumn, this isn't even the season for gathering nectar. But Mason said it was. He was just as lost as I was. Half a month later, Mason was leaving. The day he got picked up was the quietest day of my life. All I said was goodbye. It was Mason who spoke the most, telling me I could stay here, telling me what things he'd left for me, telling me once he settled down at home, he'd come back for me. I believed him. Every day I lived in that hope. But even when the time came that I had to leave the orphanage, he never showed up. Those years felt like a dream that dissolved into nothing. I thought the butterfly only existed in Zhuangzhou's dream, but years later, he took shape again in my reality. Only, he left that memory behind in the dream. So unfair. Why was I the only one who remembered? The car stopped steadily in front of a brightly lit mansion. Mason stepped out first, looking at his composed figure. I thought, maybe Mason hadn't broken his promise. He did come back for me, just that this time, he came straight to carry me to his bed. 4. Mason walked quickly, leaving me far behind. The butler came forward and took his coat. I stayed at the entrance without moving. The butler walked toward me with a smile. "Good evening." I blinked in surprise. "You know my last name?" He paused, then smiled again. "The young master told me." Oh, I couldn't help but wonder how Mason had introduced me. The air hung awkward for a moment, so I asked with a grin, "Am I the first person your young master has ever brought home?" The butler chuckled. "Yes, you're the first." Well then, I believed him. Couldn't even stop the corners of my mouth from lifting. I was led to a guest room, where the butler had even prepared clean clothes for me. His meaning was clear. Mason had things to take care of, so I should just stay here. Got it. At this point I felt like some concubine waiting in the palace. I'd better wash up and make myself presentable. While bathing, I accidentally rubbed against a scrape on my elbow. The sting made me curse my lousy father and his ancestors under my breath. When I opened the bathroom door, Mason was sitting on the edge of the bed, sitting stiffly, posture straight. I gave 2 dry laughs. Good evening." Mason's face was still calm and unreadable. Suddenly I realized something and instinctively covered the back of my neck. Whenever my temperature rose, my pheromones would leak out. I'd taken off my suppressant patch before showering, so the whole room was already filled with the ylang-ylang scent. I gave an apologetic smile. "Excuse me, do you have another suppressant patch here?" Mason didn't answer. He just walked into the bathroom. I covered my face with a sigh. With the scent thickest in there, the more he bathed, the worse it would get. Half an hour later, Mason came out, wrapped in a chill, and sat back on the bed. What I saw was his sculpted back and shoulders. I pinched my own arm, just a thin layer of muscle. While I was secretly envious, I suddenly heard the sound of plastic being torn open. I froze, not knowing where to put my hands and feet. Before I could think, Mason lifted the blanket, swung a leg over, and pressed me down. He moved as directly as someone shucking corn. At this point, I worried about his state of mind. I forced myself to speak again. Sir, maybe I should put on a suppressant patch first. His cool gaze swept across my face, voice dropping lower. Your pheromones, they're very special. Oh, the rest turned into a sharp intake of breath. My body stiffened, old instincts urging me to bite or scratch like before. Thank goodness reason held me back. Couldn't you, at least give me some warning? I glanced down, bad news. Only halfway through, I shut my eyes, gripping the sheets tight. Just make it quick. The moment I said that, his arms slid around my waist, lifted me up, and drove forward. And that was that, no turning back. Cold sweat trickled down my temples. I raised an arm to cover my eyes. No wonder he wanted a strong, durable alpha. With the way he went about things, who else could handle it? Are you a hammer or something? So rough. I think I can smell your pheromones too. Could you maybe slow down a little? Mason paused, pulled my arm away, and fixed his gaze on me. What's wrong? I have a name. Call me Mason. Oh, Mason, I whispered at once. Damn, my nose suddenly stung a little. Must have been from the pain. 5. I don't know how much time had passed. By the time Mason finally stopped, his cold, commanding pheromones had completely overpowered the ylang-ylang scent. Back then, after we'd squished together on that small bed and played around, I'd always cling to him for a long time. Even though his body felt scorching hot, the scent he carried was like cold mist on a winter morning. Taking a deep breath of it could calm my racing heart. But now, I couldn't do that. Mason finished and left. Fast, like he had a ghost chasing him. I sat up on the bed, staring at the mess I was left in. Red, purple, white, filthy, a complete disaster. And why was I doing this? Of course, for the 20 million. Right, I was working. Work isn't always glamorous. I rinsed off quickly, changed into my own clothes, and left quietly. Outside the villa, I couldn't figure out where to go. I just headed toward the brightest area, hoping to catch a taxi. Occasionally, cars passed by. One looked just like the one Mason drove tonight. I paused instinctively for a second, thinking, what if Mason had a last-minute change of heart? But it just drove past, disappearing into the night in a blink. I lowered my eyes to the shadow at my feet and was glad I only paused for a second. Otherwise, too embarrassing. At a street corner, I checked my phone. Already 2 a.m. I was about to call a taxi when a message popped up, from my bastard father, asking me to transfer him $1 million. I stared at the screen and sneered, deleting and blocking him. That guy, always so quick to reach me. 6. I left the orphanage early because my biological father showed up. Justin came with my birth certificate, dressed all proper. I actually believed he was coming to take me home. Only later did I realize, he wanted me to raise a child for him. A little girl, only 7, born after he'd forced an Omega woman while drunk. Justin was addicted to gambling, violent when drunk. The woman endured him for 8 years, then finally fled, leaving the child behind. He tricked me into coming back, then vanished, even stealing the cash and new phone Mason had left me. I was so furious. I kicked a chair to pieces. Turning around, I saw the little girl huddled in a corner, hair messy, pale face, too thin, only a pair of round eyes staring at me. Timidly, she called me brother. I didn't respond. She then offered a stick of candy, covered in dirt, holding it out carefully. I didn't take it. I sat at the door until dark, thinking about how I could earn enough to support both of us. Eventually, I realized there wasn't much to think about, just take it step by step. At my hardest, I worked 17 hours a day, juggling 4 jobs at once. Fortunately, Alice was also smart and worked hard at school. After she differentiated into an Omega, I still had to watch out for Justin. That bastard, he kept trying to sell Alice for money. 2 years ago, I made a small profit selling herbs and opened a store near Alice's high school at the start of the year. Justin occasionally swooped in like a locust. I endured it, but a few days ago, he set his eyes on my cash register. We fought. The store got wrecked. While I cleaned up the mess, Justin used my injuries as an excuse to trick Alice out of school. He drugged her and sent her to that wealthy East District club. I did everything I could to sneak in. Alice had been forced to leave her prints as proof. I begged the manager for a long time, and he finally agreed to let me take Alice's place, because of my face, and my pheromones. After settling Alice at home, I rushed back, put on the badge, and the manager took me to the private room, and that's when I saw Mason. Mason who didn't recognize me. How to describe that feeling? It felt like the heavens pitted me, yet teased me at the same time. In any case, here I was, the 20 million, the club kept 60%. $8 million left. I plan to use $5 million for Alice's overseas education, $2 million for her future wedding, leaving $1 million. 7. By the time I got back to my rented apartment, it was almost 4 a.m. My body ached so much. I just lay on the sofa for a nap, half awake. I heard Alice calling, "Brother, you've got a fever, take some medicine before sleeping." I opened my eyes. The sky was already bright. Alice had changed into her school uniform, backpack ready, squatting in front of me with water and medicine. "Brother, do you have a cold? Do you want 2 more tablets?" I shook my head and swallowed the pill with water. "Let's go, I'll take you to school." "No need, brother, you rest at home." I nudged her toward the door, took her backpack, and slung it over my own shoulder. "Enough talking, from now on, no one besides me is allowed to take you anywhere, got it?" Alice drooped her head. "Okay," she said quietly, following me obediently. After seeing her into the school gate, I went to the supermarket, picked up 2 big bags of supplies, and left them in the security room. Alice lived at school and only came home every 2 weeks. She never asked for anything, and I didn't want her to feel deprived. I left the school and went to the bank, got a card, and transferred in $1 million. Back at the apartment complex, I saw Justin outside, grinning like a weasel. "Good boy, I heard you hooked up with a rich guy. $1 million isn't a problem for you, right?" I fought the nausea and threw the card on the ground. "Take this money and get as far away as you can. If you ever come near Alice again, I'll make sure you regret it." Heading upstairs, I reached for the key, then heard footsteps behind me. I clenched my jaw and spun around, fists raised. "You damn." The last word caught in my throat, because I saw 3 figures standing there. First, the smiling butler. Second, a man in a suit carrying a medical kit. Third, Mason, wearing sunglasses. I slowly lowered my fists, forcing a smile. "Excuse me, what brings the 3 of you here?" The butler spoke first. "When the maid went to clean your room this morning, she found blood on the sheets." The man in the suit added, "Allow me to examine you." Mason concluded, "Open the door." "Damn it, where's the ground hole I can crawl into?" 8. Mason, what a show-off. He somehow made my fabric sofa feel like real leather. I grabbed a small stool, plopped down across from him. The doctor looked at me, concerned. I forced a smile, and under 6 pairs of watchful eyes, lifted my hoodie. Mason's brow twitched slightly. I pretended not to notice and showed the doctor my elbow. "The bleeding's from here. Got in a fight a few days ago, and last night, I didn't notice it rubbed open again, but there's more than one stain on the sheets." The butler reminded me. I had no shame left. I glanced at Mason, casually said, "Yeah." Tossing and turning, stuff gets everywhere. The room went deathly silent. The doctor cleared his throat. "I think it's still necessary to examine you, just in case." I couldn't take it. I closed my eyes, looked at Mason, lowered my face, and stayed silent. Half a minute of stalemate. Finally, Mason spoke. "Bandage him." I exhaled quietly. The doctor worked skillfully, cleaned and bandaged me, noticed my fever, gave me some medicine, then packed the medical kit neatly. The butler was already at the door, ready to leave. I pulled on my hoodie and said goodbye, closing the door behind me. Peeking out, the statue on the sofa was still there. I ruffled my hair, slowly fixed my clothes, stealing glances at him. "Why aren't you leaving yet? You picked a rose from the garden last night." I looked down, whispering. I'd never seen a white rose bloom so beautifully, couldn't resist. I planted it. I choked on my words, but forced out. "Then, that's impressive. The garden has over a dozen flowers. Only the white rose is planted by me." I chuckled awkwardly, about to pay him $200 from my wallet, when he said, "I told you, my name's Mason." "Ah, got it." Mason's expression didn't change, his gaze steady. "My pheromones, your body doesn't seem to reject them." True, 10 years ago, I'd been marked at the back of the neck. How could I reject it now? I forced a smile, pulled $200 out of my wallet, placed it on the table. "Coincidence, I guess. Here, consider this my compensation for the rose. I won't pick it again." Mason's scrutinizing gaze stayed on my face. "Carlos, what? Have we met before?" My smile faltered. Mason's eyes had curiosity and caution, no hint of the relaxed familiarity I knew. He looked at me as if I were a stranger. I replaced my smile, scanned the room. "I'm just an ordinary guy trying to earn money for my sister's education. My finances are what you see. If it weren't for last night, I'd probably never have met you." Mason's half-lowered lashes hid his usual icy intensity. Seeing that, I felt slightly dazed. I exhaled, went to the door, and opened it for him. Sorry for the wait, you should go back. Mason stopped at the door, voice indifferent. Next Monday and Tuesday, keep those days free. I'll have someone pick you up Sunday night. My susceptible period. Oh, okay. Almost read too much into it. After closing the door, it hit me. So he personally checked me out, to prepare for his susceptible period? 9. Mason's susceptible period basically meant I'd be flipped and handled over and over again, but I'd also be bitten, pinned to the bathroom door, pressed against the floor-to-ceiling window, on the carpet, on his bed. A surge of long-suppressed pheromones flooded into me. I felt wrapped in cold mist, while my body burned beneath it. Familiar, yet foreign, intimate, yet distant. Once Mason had enough, he flipped me over again. My eyes glazed over, staring at the chandelier in his bedroom. I could barely tell dream from reality. I raised my hands, wanting a hug, but meeting Mason's gaze, I panicked and smiled awkwardly. Those black eyes held only desire, no affection, like a sharp blade, slicing through my days. I withdrew my hands, buried them in the pillow. Just as I tried to roll over, Mason gripped my shoulder. Hot sweat dripped from his jaw, breathing slowly steadying. I swallowed, throat dry, and asked uncertainly, "You okay now?" Mason looked at me for a few seconds, then at my right hand hidden in the pillow, voice surprisingly soft. "You can hug me." I froze, then slowly smiled, a strange ache swelling in my chest. Didn't want to. My hands are cold. 10. Mason seemed satisfied with me as a companion. Every month, except during his 2 or 3 days of susceptible period, I'd see his car outside the building or the supermarket once or twice a week. Most of the time, the assistant drove. Occasionally, Mason came himself. Now, the villa had a pair of slippers just for me, prepared by the butler. I could stay overnight there, sometimes in the guest room, sometimes in Mason's bedroom. He seemed less distant toward me. After a smoke, he'd share one with me. If I picked his white rose and brought it home, he never made an issue. Sometimes we'd have dinner together. If I complained about old folks stealing peanuts from my store, he'd seriously analyze solutions instead of being annoyed. Listening to him, I felt I could buy out the supermarket across the street. Mason had become more tolerant. Lately, when I lingered in his bed in the morning, he didn't call me out. He'd just walk to the bed, silently assess me, then leave without a word. By the time I went downstairs, it was nearly 10. Breakfast was still on the table. I wasn't hungry. Poking at the egg white while greeting the butler just back from the garden, he handed me a white rose, fallen from the garden. Perfect. Now I could take it home openly. The butler sat beside me, noting this year's roses bloomed better than last year. It clicked. The white rose had bloomed once. My contract with Mason was nearly up. If he didn't plan to marry soon, I wouldn't mind continuing this arrangement. Half a month before the contract ended, Mason flew abroad for a merger, delayed a month according to his assistant. I sighed in relief. I had worried how to decline if he needed me in these last 2 weeks. Now the deal could end early. Good. But the next day, the assistant came to the store with a new contract. Mason wants to extend it for 2 more years. I politely refused. No, thanks. The assistant looked disappointed. May I ask why? I smiled. Health reasons. My body wasn't cooperating. I was already pregnant. 11. About half a month ago, I realized I'd become unusually dependent on Mason's pheromones. Whenever we slept together, I couldn't help rolling toward him, or more precisely, into his arms. It was abnormal. Even during his susceptible period, I hadn't been this clingy. Even stranger, I became lazy, carrying bags of rice was slower, and a day of doing nothing still left me exhausted. Most concerning, I lost my appetite. Even after going a day without food, I sometimes felt queasy, and my lower abdomen twinged occasionally. I feared a serious illness and decided to see a doctor the day before Mason left on a business trip. The checkup revealed nothing serious, except I had a little life growing inside me. In that reproductive cavity, previously stimulated by Mason's pheromones and repeatedly strained, a tiny life had begun. The doctor gestured. The space was barely bigger than an egg. It wouldn't continue developing or grow with the fetus. I understood. There was a life in me destined to fade. At most, in 3 months, it would end on its own. I couldn't help but laugh. Typical of my little one, saving money before even being born. After leaving the hospital, I shoved the reports in the trash. But one report, showing the tiny black dot like a sesame seed on the ultrasound, caught my eye again. Honestly, if I had the chance, I'd love to spend on you. 12. A month later, Alice had a break from her dorm and came straight to my store, chattering away. She asked what I wanted for lunch and offered to buy it. I was busy and didn't have much appetite, so I said, just a bowl of plain rice porridge. Alice pouted, unhappy. What? Amy says you've been eating porridge every day. Has our family gone into debt? I chuckled. She was too sensitive. Nope, I hate owing anyone anything. I just felt like porridge. Besides, I'm at the store, don't worry about me being hungry. I handed her $100 bill. Sit in the store and eat, then bring it back. Got it? Alice didn't take the money and walked off. Slightly sulky. 20 minutes later, she returned with a bowl of porridge. She called Amy to handle the cash register and tied her apron to organize the shelves. Fine. I carried the bowl into the stockroom. On the only desk sat piles of near-expiry products. I dragged over a small stool and sat against the shelves. Just after taking a sip, a shadow fell in front of me. I looked up to see spotless leather shoes, straight trousers, a well-tailored suit, and finally, a cold yet handsome face. I licked my lips, set the plastic container on a nearby shelf, and greeted with a smile. Was the business trip smooth? Mason was silent, his gaze scanning from my neck down, resting finally on my wrist. You've lost weight. I froze for a moment, then clasped my hands behind my back, laughing awkwardly. The black clothes just make me look slimmer. Mason looked at me, voice cold and hard. I'm not blind. What could I say? Just smile. He kept staring, almost as if his own gaze was making him angry. The air carried his pheromones subtly, normally harmless, but irresistible to me now. If he stayed longer, I feared I'd dash forward. I cleared my throat and lowered my face, trying to shoo him away. Mason, if there's nothing else, please leave. The delivery driver's coming soon, and I need to organize the stockroom. Went to the hospital. What? The assistant said you had a health issue. Oh, I scratched my nose, voice lowering unconsciously. Went already. What did the doctor say? His pheromones grew stronger, making my heart itch. I pressed my hands together, stepping back. The doctor said, it'll be fine after a while. After a while? How long? 8, 9 months. Mason advanced, forcing me to retreat, back against the wall. I realized I'd walked into a trap. Embarrassment crept up my spine. Mason remained cold and composed. You refused me because of a health issue but won't tell me what it is. I have to guess. I turned away, avoiding his intense gaze. Can't it just be an infectious disease? A brief silence, then a low hum. You probably don't have the energy for that. Mason spoke tactfully, but I felt my face burn. I glanced at him, uneasy. Well, it wasn't something I thought worth telling anyone. Am I anyone? Mason's suddenly raised voice startled me. I blinked. Then who else? Mason stayed silent, expression unreadable. I scrambled for an explanation, blurting, don't worry, I can't carry this child to term, so you won't have to worry about me coming after you for support. I haven't told anyone else, so your reputation's safe. I rattled off this explanation and finally noticed Mason's face darkening, furrowed brows, stepping closer. I had nowhere to retreat. Awkwardly, don't come so close. I don't feel well. Just as I tried to push him away, Mason grabbed my wrist. Go to the hospital. 13. Mason almost dragged me out. I sighed, calling after him. I understand you're eager to handle this situation, but can't you wait a bit? The delivery driver's almost here. Let me finish moving the stock first. There are only 2 girls here. I can't leave them. Before I finished, a small truck stopped outside. I quickly freed myself and pushed him aside, pulling out a pack of cigarettes to greet the person jumping down. Here, Hale. Hale smiled and took the cigarette. Hey, didn't interrupt lunch, did I? No, already ate. While I lit it, Mason came beside me. He snatched the lighter and opened pack, firmly pulling me aside. I lowered my voice. Can't you let me finish moving the stock? Then I have to deliver to the next store. What did you call him? Hale, didn't you hear? Mason nodded seriously. Strange. Hale started unloading, but Mason still held me back. Just as I was about to get annoyed, Alice peeked around the shelf, gossiping as always. Mason waved. Come here. Alice ran over. Mason pointed at me. Watch him. Then he took off his jacket, shoved it into my arms, and walked away silently. Alice looped her arm through mine. Starstruck. Brother, is he helping us with the rice? I stared at Mason, who headed straight to the truck, silently calculating the labor cost. Maybe. Mason made trip after trip. More elderly customers filled the store. I sighed, yelling to the snack section. Miss, don't spit shells on the floor. She ignored me, whispering to her friend, eyes following Mason back and forth. I laughed at Mason mischievously. Someone wants to set you up. Ha! Mason glared at me. After leaving the stockroom, he walked straight over, hands down, wiped my sweat. I checked my pockets, no tissue on me. Just then, a pack of tissues landed in my hand. Brother, I brought it. Seeing I didn't take it, Alice shoved it into my hand and ran to the snack section. Brother, I'm sweeping the shelves. Don't wander off. I lifted an eyelid, annoyed. Don't you have hands? Mason waved his dirty hands in front of me. I pursed my lips. Really high maintenance. We're all just using the back of our hands to wipe. I pulled out a tissue, wiped down his forehead, muttering, if I wipe your sweat, don't expect payment. Mason turned his face, chin lifted, then wiped carefully. 14. Mason finished moving all the stock in 20 minutes. While he went to the restroom to wash up, I took 2 bottles of water over to Hale. When I first opened the store, I knew nothing, and several suppliers were introduced to me by Hale. I was genuinely grateful. Hale took only 1 bottle. I meant to offer him a cigarette too, but then I remembered Mason had confiscated the pack. I had no choice but to laugh awkwardly. Hale smiled too, glancing at me. See you, Carlos. After watching him leave, I turned and saw Mason in his black shirt, standing there. I had no idea for how long. I walked over and returned his jacket, giving him the remaining bottle of water. Thanks for helping. I'll tell them. I don't want it. The bottle froze midair. Fine. Never mind. After instructing Amy, I found Alice in the stockroom. This afternoon, cover for me for a bit. If I'm not back by 6 p.m., close the store early. Dinner's on you. Don't wait for me. Got it? Alice's eyes sparkled. Brother, am I really going to be an aunt? Seeing I didn't respond, she nervously explained. Brother, I wasn't eavesdropping on purpose. That guy came into the store, walked straight to the stockroom with a cold face. I thought he was here to cause trouble. As he walked past the door with a broom, I heard him say, you'd lost weight. I thought you two were just catching up. I couldn't help listening. I'm sorry. Alice's voice grew smaller. I laughed softly and patted her head. No worries. Don't apologize. And forget about being an aunt. That's not happening. What? Also, that cold-faced guy you mentioned, he's more like my former boss. What happened between us isn't what you think. Oh, Alice muttered, cheeks red, and shuffled off. When I got into Mason's car, he was messaging on his phone. When he put it down, I asked, are we going to the hospital I went to before? Mason didn't seem to hear, silently buckling in and driving with one hand on the wheel. What had I done to him? Today Mason was inexplicably strange. The road looked familiar, so I tried again. You're not taking me to your place, are you? I can't. Carlos. Mason's voice carried a trace of anger. We're no longer bound by contract. Got it. Don't be mad. Mason went silent, waiting at a red light. I cautiously asked, then why are we going back? The light turned green. Mason glanced at me, expression unreadable as usual. Can't it just be to have a simple meal? Oh, but I already ate. You're full from 2 sips of porridge. Yeah, I'm full now anyway. Mason seemed amused. Then watch me eat. So petty. 15. The meal Mason took me to wasn't simple. It nearly covered all 8 major cuisines. In every way, it looked a little like a farewell feast. Mason went upstairs to change while the butler fussed over me, using serving utensils to plate the food. Soon Mason returned to the dining room, pulled a chair next to me, and sat down. He brought over the piled-up plates in front of me and began peeling shrimp. I glanced at his expression, about to ask when we'd go to the hospital, when his phone rang. Mason didn't hurry. He placed a full shrimp in my bowl before lifting his hand. Hand me the phone. I gave it to him, seeing Mother on the caller ID, and immediately dropped it on the table. Mason glanced at me, then slowly peeled another shrimp. Answer it. Speaker on. Oh. I tapped quickly. A moment later, a voice full of anger came through. Why did you skip lunch today? Mason handed me the second peeled shrimp, and I instinctively opened my mouth to eat while listening. First, I never agreed to that appointment. You decided for both of us. Second, I've told you before, I don't like omegas. Mason, what attitude is this? My attitude hasn't changed in years. You're the one wasting effort. Mason, after one shout, the line fell silent except for faint, trembling breaths. I could imagine his mother, fuming, eyes squeezed shut, gasping. Mason seemed oblivious, calmly saying, if there's nothing else, I'm hanging up. He gestured for me to hang up. I didn't dare move, fidgeting, pretending busy. As Mason removed his gloves, his mother's voice came again, tinged with sorrow. Mason, do you really have to keep entangled with that alpha? Monitoring me? Mason frowned. Monitoring? Mason, Your eldest sister and second brother are gone. You're all I have left. Why won't you listen? I sensed I shouldn't hear any more. As I tried to slip away, Mason grabbed my shoulder. I felt pinned, listening to her near breakdown. The director of the treatment center promised me you'd change. But the moment you meet him, he leads you again. What's so special about him? And he's an alpha, why can't you forget him? After a few sobs, she hung up. Mason stayed silent, staring at the phone until it went black. His face drained of color. He didn't move for a long while. I looked at the butler, who shook his head apologetically. I misread it, thinking I should step aside. As I stood, Mason suddenly grabbed my wrist. When he looked at me, panic flashed in his eyes, barely hidden. His Adam's apple moved twice before he found his voice. Are you full? I nodded. Mason said nothing, eyes drifting to somewhere distant. I couldn't sit still, cleared my throat, and asked carefully, when are we going to the hospital? Mason snapped back to reality, still feeling unwell. I shook my head. He seemed relieved. Then no rush. Tomorrow works. I raised an eyebrow. Aren't you in a hurry to? No. Mason suddenly raised his voice. Then, meeting my eyes, slumped like a punctured balloon. Sorry, my mistake for not explaining. I said I'd take you to the hospital because you mentioned feeling unwell, not what you're thinking. Mason looked up at me. Carlos, I'll take responsibility for you and the child. Oh, I don't need you to. As for the child, you won't get that chance. What do you mean? Mason's normally steady voice wavered. I smiled, recalling what the doctor said. Before I could speak, my phone rang. When I answered, Alice's crying came through. Brother, Justin, is at the store. 16. The entrance of the store was crowded with people. I pushed through and ran in. Justin had Alice by the hair, threatening her to open the cash drawer. Brother, Justin, you're asking for trouble. I grabbed the metal box from the counter and slammed it onto the back of his head. Let go of him. Justin reeked of alcohol, eyes bloodshot. Just as I was about to strike again, he shoved Alice forward with sudden force. I panicked, caught Alice, and stumbled back 2 steps, hitting the sharp edge of a glass display. Cold sweat ran down my back. Brother, are you okay? I forced a smile, shook my head, and held Alice close as we moved aside, making space for Mason, who had just arrived. Mason glanced at me, then stepped forward and delivered a brutal kick to Justin's chest. Justin hit the ground, cursing, and Mason grabbed his collar, punching him with precision. Whether in a suit like now, or in a white tee and sweatpants like before, Mason hit just as hard. Brother, why are you smiling? Are you really okay? Your face is so pale. I shook off the pain and reassured him. I'm fine. By the way, did you call the police? And Amy? Alice nodded. I called as soon as Justin came in. Amy ran to block him, got pushed, and hit her head. I told her to hide in the stockroom. Pain surged again. I took a deep breath, clenching my hands. Good. Now go to the stockroom, help Amy out. I'll call a car to take you both to the hospital. Alice didn't move, head down, frozen. What's wrong? Her voice trembled with tears. Brother, you seem to be bleeding a lot. I followed her gaze. The light gray sweatpants were darkened by blood, and a few streaks of red stained my white sneakers. I froze, instinctively lifting a hand to my abdomen. Looking up, my eyes met Mason's, red-rimmed and intense. My mind went blank, unsure how to react. Carlos. My knees suddenly went weak. I felt like I might faint from the sight of blood. 17. When I opened my eyes, I saw the white ceiling. On the second glance, Mason was sitting beside the bed, elbows on his knees, head down, strands of hair falling forward. His tie was crooked, sleeves stained with blood. I poked him lightly from under the blanket. Mason jerked up. You're awake. Any discomfort? I shook my head. What about Alice? She's in the next room, with Amy. Justin was taken to the police, and I've instructed a lawyer to press charges with the heaviest penalties. I nodded, silent for a moment, but Mason's gaze on me seemed full of things left unsaid. I smiled. Go ahead, say what's on your mind. After a pause, Mason spoke. The child didn't make it. I'm sorry. I know, it wasn't going to survive anyway. Mason still frowned, guilt deep in his eyes, almost avoiding looking at me. Carlos, the doctor said, a mature alpha can't get pregnant, but your body had already been exposed to my pheromones earlier, so it had started to change even then. But you forgot, I calmly added, taking over his words. So you thought I was just a regular alpha, that anything could be done without consequence. Mason shook his head, shame flashing in his eyes. No, the truth is, around you, I often couldn't control myself. The first night, I told you your pheromones were special. My first feeling wasn't desire, but familiarity. So the next day I asked if we had met before, and you told me no. Yeah, I lied. Why? I looked up at the ceiling, sighed softly, then turned to him with a smile. Because I knew, back then, you wouldn't fully believe me anyway. Mason didn't speak. After a long pause, he finally looked up at me, almost pleading. Carlos, can you tell me, what happened back then? 16. It was my turn to be silent. Where should I even start? From my unlucky yet somehow fortunate 13-year-old self. But most of it was trivial, almost embarrassing to recount. Mason and I were worlds apart. Over the years, I often thought that the special treatment I received from Mason back then must have been due to perfect timing, circumstances, and luck. It was as if he had only come to the orphanage to complete a mission. Once done, he would return to his own world. Love for me was a gift, but for Mason, perhaps it was just a bonus. So for a long time, I believed that him not coming to take me away was the natural and reasonable course of events. But years later, we met again. Mason seemed to be completing a new mission. He had erased his memories, yet I couldn't help but be drawn to him. This time, I told myself not to expect any particular outcome, just enjoy the journey. Because the ending of a flower blooming is predetermined, but the process of blooming is always new. So I didn't care much whether Mason remembered me or not. Rebuilding our connection was fine too. But now, Mason wanted to understand the past me. I tugged the corner of my lips and looked at him. Mason, what do you want me to tell you? His voice was hoarse. Why, did I plant white roses in the garden? I was speechless. So Mason didn't even know why he planted flowers. But now, he was certain it had something to do with me. I smiled and said boldly, probably because I gave you white roses many times. Why did you give them to me? I lowered my gaze, voice dropping unconsciously. Because I liked you. Liked the flowers, or liked me. Answer me, Carlos. Here it was again, the always calm, composed Mason, eyebrows furrowed, eyes anxious, overlapped a bit with the Mason from my memories. I looked elsewhere and smiled nostalgically. I liked seeing him smile when he received the flowers, but the rose bushes were almost stripped bare by me, and I never saw him smile. I thought he didn't like them, so I stopped giving them. Mason watched me silently, gaze intense, as if searching for something in my eyes. After a long pause, he lowered his gaze, lashes trembling, voice rough. I definitely smiled, just didn't let you see it. Warmth suddenly surged in my eyes. Mason hadn't regained his memory, he was just using what he knew now to understand his past self. Does that mean, the Mason now also? I sniffed, smiling as I asked, Mason, do you think a person can fall in love with someone again and again? A flash of realization crossed Mason's eyes. After a moment of silence, he slowly raised the back of his hand, brushing it lightly against my face. Do you think so? I blinked away tears, pressing my lips into a small smile. Not sure. Mason let out a self-deprecating laugh, head bowed. Honestly, I'm not sure either. When I was a kid, after the family internal conflicts took my older sister and brother one after another, I was secretly sent to an orphanage. At 18, they brought me back, then sent me to a private hospital. I was treated by those specialists for 2 years. My head got emptier and emptier. Eventually, I couldn't even remember why they treated me. And that orphanage, along with those years, in my mind, only left a hollow shell. I only remember, I went there, and I left. Mason lifted his head to meet my eyes. Pain and guilt mixed in his expression. Carlos, I wasn't born to feel deeply. After leaving the treatment center, I wasn't sure if I still had the capacity to love someone. But with you, I realized, albeit late, I didn't want to let go. I curved my lips, softly asking, want to change the ending? What? Mason's eyes carried a hint of adorably puzzled confusion. I laughed, shook my head slightly, and asked again, want a hug? Mason looked even more stunned. I half sighed, half smiled, reaching out from under the blanket. I want to hug you. Mason rubbed himself upright, then leaned down slowly, slightly stiff. I looped one arm around his shoulders, resting my chin on him, feeling the subtle tremor of his breath. Mason, if we don't let go, would we still end up in the hospital? A drop of warm liquid landed at my neck. No, the 18-year-old Mason was at everyone's mercy. The 28-year-old Mason controls others. I wiped my tears and laughed through them, teasing, but the 28-year-old Mason doesn't seem to love anyone anymore. Mason stepped back, holding my hand, eyes still red, asking urgently, you've seen it, right? Seen what? Seen me loving you. For a moment, my nose tingled again. Because I had seen it, I couldn't resist leaning closer. Perhaps my expression gave Mason the answer. He brushed my eye corner with a finger and said earnestly, I want to ask you to be my evaluator, to grade my performance. You set the standards. Score me monthly. You don't need to do anything else. Just tell me the score at the end of the month. I'll adjust accordingly. That sounded kind of strange. I blinked, half smiling, and asked, what's your target score? Of course, 100. Oh, do you want to know your starting score? Mason thought for a moment. 20. I suppressed a laugh, shook my head, raised one finger to my face. 1. Fine. I smiled, eyes squinting. Silly Mason. How could he not notice even with both my nostrils flaring so hard? 17. I stayed in the hospital for a week. On the day of discharge, Mason's lawyer came to the room. He said Justin's sentence had been handed down, full penalty, 5 years. Mason was helping me put on socks, head down, silent. The lawyer immediately understood. Don't worry, when he's out, you can find any excuse to put him back in. Mason finally muttered, After the lawyer left, I quietly asked, would that count as skirting the law? Mason glanced at me, grabbed my other ankle. Not really. He earns over $3 million a year in base salary. A little wandering here and there doesn't matter. I had been overthinking. After leaving the hospital, I headed straight for the supermarket. After Justin's 2 outbursts, business would obviously be affected, so Mason and I agreed to close this store and reopen a new one. We already had the location picked out, just across the street from Mason's company building. First priority was closing the current store. Return what could be returned, discount sell the rest. The elderly loved it, they could get some bargains. Amy was still recovering, Alice had gone to school, so Mason arranged a van full of staff for me, all in suits and polished shoes. They intimidated the older ladies from coming in. Only when I grabbed the megaphone and started shouting did they cautiously step inside with their small bags. Mason joined in the closing activities, insisting on driving his $50 million car to deliver $200 orders. I had to go with him, otherwise customers wouldn't dare sign for the goods. By the time we finished, it was the end of the month. After dinner, I was wandering in Mason's garden when he found me, serious and tense. What score would you give? I nearly didn't react. Suppressing a laugh, I plucked a dew-soaked white rose and tucked it in his lapel. Guess. Mason lowered his eyes to the flower. Testing. 60. Silly Mason. I walked slowly, hands behind my back. Lazily. Right. 60. After a short distance, Mason caught up, stopping in front of me. His Adam's apple rolled twice before he spoke. Did I just guess wrong? I squinted, tilting my head to study him for a moment. Then a question came to mind. Mason, once you get a perfect score from me, what do you plan to do? Propose. I raised an eyebrow. To me, Mason huffed, a little flustered. Who else? I smiled. But I can't have children for you. Mason nodded solemnly. Neither can I. To prevent any accidents, I had a minor procedure while you were in the hospital. My eyes widened. The kind I think it is. Yes. What can one even say? I looked up at the night sky, then back at Mason. After a long pause, I said, so all your vast fortune won't have an heir? Mason seemed relieved, a playful smile in his eyes, taking my hand as we walked back. What heir? You spend as much as you want. If it's too much, just donate the rest. Then, if I spend 100,000 a day, can I finish it? Mason raised an eyebrow. 100,000? You'd need several lifetimes. I laughed. Then can you teach me how to spend money? Sure. First step, forget the supermarket. One person in our family earning is enough. I pulled my hand away and jumped in front of him. Are you trying to lock me at home? Mason grabbed my hand again. I plan to lock you in tomorrow. For what? Oh, right, tomorrow is his sensitive period. I held the doorframe. Serious. Mason, you're only at 60 points. Don't think about what you shouldn't. Mason let go of my hand, pushing me inside. I just want you to sit nearby and chat with me. Is that so wrong? I huffed. You'd better.